Hello and welcome to the Ohio Arts Council's Rife Gallery programming series for our current exhibition, Arts Beacon of Light. Today we are thrilled to present artist Cody F. Miller. As a brief reminder, we're tuning in today from separate locations, so if we have any blip in the sound or anything like that, please stick with us. We'll keep the ball rolling for you, no problem. Also, when you have a moment, if you have questions, go ahead and pop them in the chat. You have that on both Facebook and Zoom, and we'll get to those questions at the end. We're super glad that you're here with us today. And so you're not here for me. I'm going to hand it right over to Cody. Cody, please share with us your art.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for taking some time out of your schedule to be with us and hear a little bit about my story and a little bit about my art. So I'm going to start with a story that kind of anchors all of my artwork, and it's probably about a good 7 or 8 minutes. So I'm going to share the story with you, and then we'll go from there. And then the images will go a little much quicker from that point. And
Cody, you just broke up.
Roughly when I was like a junior in high school until I graduated from high school.
Hey, Cody.
I go to a little village named St. Louis. It's about an hour east of Columbus, sandwiched in between Newark and Utah. Okay, can you hear me now? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you now. We can hear you now.
Okay. So I'm going to give you a little bit of my past. I grew up in a small little village called St. Louisville, Ohio. It's sandwiched in between Newark and Utica, about an hour east of here. My father died when I was 2.5 in a tractor accident. His name was Jim. And shortly after that, my mother, Harriet, was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. From an early age, my brother Adam and I kind of witnessed my mom kind of constructing this makeshift village of support to help our family. When I was about 10, we went down to Florida to visit my grandmother, and we were there for about a week. And my mother had some next door neighbors named Bob and Jan, my grandmother that is, and they would come and visit us from time to time during this week. And I remember they came to one of my birthday parties while I was there. It was a birthday party, and they got me this Jaws coloring book. And I even remember at that age, like, the only color I'm going to need for that coloring book is the color red. Before we left, my mother exchanged phone numbers with Jan. And then over the years, she just kind of kept in contact with her. As my mother's MS got worse, I remember one day my mom was like smoking a cigarette, listening to this big furniture stereo, and she just calmly looks at me and says, Bob and Jan are going to sell everything, and they're going to come to St. Louis, and you're going to help your family, our family. And honestly, I just didn't quite know what to do with that. About a week or two later, my mom reiterated the same thing, and I said, whatever. So a couple weeks after that, I come in from mowing the grass, and I get this phone call, and it's Jan on the phone, and she's like, "Hey, Cody, it's Jan. We're about 4 hours away. We'll be there soon." And everything just kind of went slow-mo. I did not know what to do with this. So once I got off the phone, I rushed upstairs and like tried to make the bed and clean up the place. At this point, my mother was we converted the whole living room to her bedroom. So I was just trying to convert everything, get it ready. And then I remember when Bob and Jan kind of rolled into our place. Bob was driving this large Lincoln Continental with a U-Haul hooked to the back of it. And just to look on his face as he's taken in this tired village, this tired house, and this really odd welcome from us. Just this look of like, what the hell have we gotten ourselves into? A little bit about Bob and Jan. Bob was from Sicily and had very dark skin. He used to be a boxer, and he stopped boxing after the mafia told him to take a dive in a fight, and he didn't. Later, he opened up like a youth league for troubled youth, a boxing youth league. Jan was a very light skin of Swedish origin, and she she was just an amazing person that really fought for anybody that she believed in. They dealt with racism from kind of day one in their marriage. Um, I remember when they first came they came to our family, it just brought immediate stability to our family. Um, within about within about 3 or 4 months, they moved away about 20 minutes away to Heath, Ohio. And then from there, my brother and I moved out because my mom could no longer take care of us. And we went and lived with an aunt and uncle for a little while. And then my brother went and lived with another aunt and uncle until he graduated from high school. And I went and lived with Bob and Jan. This was this was difficult to say the least. Um, I uh, I I just, you know, I didn't know how to function in a healthy family. I moved away and came back many times, and each time Bob and Jan were trying to find a home that could support me in ways that they couldn't. It was incredibly confusing, and I would walk into these new homes and just blow the whole thing up. It was a total blitzkrieg of emotions trying to find my place in this world. Um, but every time the dust settled, they were there, and they weren't going anywhere, and they believed in me. And as an artist, Jan and Bob always found ways to support the passion I had since an early age. I remember Jan getting me this large Van Gogh book, and inside she wrote the inscription to Cody, our next Van Gogh. I knew it was an outrageous statement, but I received it wholeheartedly nonetheless. I remember Bob taking me to the Governor's Award exhibition at Fort Hayes because I had a few pieces in the show. And on our way home, he shared his thoughts on why he thought my art had a distinctive voice. I didn't know what that meant at the time, but I thought of it as a compliment. My last stay with Bob and Jan, she came down with pneumonia, and within those days, she died. They lived in Florida because of her compromised immune system. We were devastated, especially Bob. At one point, Bob bought this old wooden boat and that needed a lot of restoration. I would come home, I would do my homework, I would head out to the garage and crank RM and climb inside that boat and work at stripping off old varnish. Somehow that little boat became a cocoon, a sanctuary. And there was something beautifully methodical about working on that vessel. We took it to Buckeye Lake a few times, and I began to realize the boat became our way of processing the loss of Jan. Shortly after that, I moved out for the last time. I did not leave on good terms with Bob, and it primarily had to do with me being completely self-absorbed. I have not seen him in 33 years. I do not even know if he's still alive. To this day, I'm still trying to figure out why Bob and Jan gave up everything to help a family that were essentially strangers to them. As the realization of their incredible sacrifice sinks in a little more year after year, I'm baffled in a powerful, beautiful, confusing way. They planted seeds that didn't deter them. I always hope when I share this that this testimony might do them justice wherever they may be, that they would know that their sacrifice was not in vain, that the expensive grace that they bestowed upon me completely changed the trajectory of my life. Anne Lamott said, "I do not understand the mystery of grace, only that it meets us where we are and does not leave us where it found us." This grace played an instrumental role in me graduating from CCAD, and me teaching and promoting artists with disabilities for 27 years, and me volunteering at a food pantry for the last 9 years, painting murals for orphans recovering from cleft palate surgery in China, and continually creating mixed media art that explores that mysterious word grace. Their love for me makes me think about how even the smallest acts of kindness might be enough to change someone's life. This is the main foundation for all this work. Me trying to figure out why these people that were completely strangers to us gave up everything to help us. Inside that, there were some other really key people that really helped our family, like Elaine, my Uncle Dave, and my Aunt Sheila were playing really important roles also in terms of conveying this grace to me that in many ways I still don't know what to do with. So anyways, that's the basis, and we will go from there. So thank you for your patience. Next slide, please. This next 16 images are primarily going to be from the Hebrew Bible, and So I'm going to share with you some of the stories behind these images and some of my thoughts behind them. So this is from a short book called Ruth, and this Amy, of course, name of this image is Ruth and Naomi's journey. Naomi and her husband, her sons left Bethlehem because of a famine. They took the risks at being immigrants in Moab. Both her sons married women from the region, Orpah and Ruth. And life was going well above average. It wasn't home, but it was the closest thing to home away from home that they'd ever known. Naomi's husband died, and 10 years later, her two sons died. Naomi started the journey back home. Orpah went back to her hometown while Ruth decided to accompany her mother-in-law, adopting both her nation and her God. On the journey back to Bethlehem, they barely talk. Everything they have has been taken away from them, their husbands, their sources of income, and their whole sense of stability. Whenever this story is like talked about in a church, I never ever hear them talk about that journey back from Moab to Bethlehem. The journey was roughly about 100 miles. So if they're averaging 3 miles per hour, it's probably about a week's journey. And the next 4 images are basically a series of that on Ruth and Naomi's journey. And it's a constant question of like trying to find home. Of course, home means so many different things to so many different people, you know. It could be the physical home. It could be a place where you feel like you belong, where you feel like you're loved, where you know, it's whatever home might mean to you. And so in this series, I wanted to kind of convey that, you know, with showing the little showing the turtle in the front is just this kind of way of talking about how sometimes this deep, devastating grief just puts everything in slow-mo. Next image, please. So I wanted to just talk a little bit about, I wanted to show just a little bit about like, even inside our grief, like there can still be light. Sometimes we have to squint our eyes to see it. Sometimes we have to really work hard to see something underneath that darkness. To the right of that screen, I wanted to show like how, just a close-up of how I use collage and how I'll use painting and paint markers and stuff. To the left is, of course, it's the painting and drawing, and then to the right is pure collage. Next image, please. I love playing with scale in my work for various reasons. In this one, with just these large birds in the background, it's again this kind of surreal experience that sometimes grief is when you're trying to find your home inside of that grief, how everything might look larger than it may be in real life, or you know, or just things that might seem good that are a mirage. The close-up to the right is lots of beer caps, beer bottle caps. I particularly loved using that in this image. In some of the faces in the back, there was used, some of the markings on the back were used using like almost like a scratch board, like I painted and then scratched into it with a sharp image. Next image, please. Okay. I'm always amazed at people when they're going through something really, really hard, where they still have the ability to give to others. This is definitely not a strength of mine. There was a patch a few years ago where it was probably some of the hardest moments in my life, and I had hardly any peripheral vision in terms of like being able to be there for other people, because it just took so much energy out of me just dealing with the thing that was right in front of me. Yeah, so in this image, you know, they're walking along, and one of them sees this bird that's got like a broken wing or something, and there's just that thing of like, should we just keep going, or should we actually try to fix this bird? And we're gonna have to carry this bird with us, and you know, nurse it to health. And I just wanted to show like that whole thing of like how so much often in times of us being able to go through that darkness, that dark night of the soul, how it so can equip us to you know, to be there for other people in a really meaningful meaningful way. Uh, so to the right here, the close-up of the woman on the right, that little piece there, when I collect materials, I categorize them, but then I have like books and books where I kind of know where stuff is. And, you know, some of these things, I love it, but I have to wait for it, for that right moment to use it. And sometimes, you know, I'll use it immediately after I buy it. But then sometimes when I use it, it's like I might have to wait a year or two. Um, uh, I kind of equate it to, for a number of years when I would bike to work. For whatever reason, like I would be on my bike and a squirrel would jump out of the woods really quick, and I would run over their tail. And this happened like 5 or 6 times over like a period of a year or two. And I had this like, you know, unproven theory that there was, you know, a bunch of these squirrels on this one side of the road. And this is like this initiation period for this squirrel. And, you know, it's just like, wait for it, wait for it, wait for it. And like the squirrels are like, now, you know, and another squirrel runs across the path. I run over his tail, he's in the club. But it kind of feels like that. Like I get something like this little piece here to the right, and it's just so wonderful. And I want to use it so badly, but I have to wait for that moment. And it's just this kind of like, wait for it, wait for it, wait for it now. And I love that tension. It is a tension because so many times I just want instant gratification with something that I find, and I want to use it immediately. But it's a good tension. Next image, please. So I did a series called Sojourners, and this is just 2 images from that. So in Psalm 84, it speaks of a sojourner going through the valley of Baca. And this is a place near Jerusalem. The traditional rendering of the words is Valley of Weeping. Some scholars suggest that the valley might have been called that because it was lined with tombs. And I go, this is just a valley that all of us must go through times, and sometimes the darkness seems beyond description. And for me, I talk about a point, it's just like often this is where I most acutely and most aware of God's kindness towards me, God's grace, inside this kind of disorienting place. Also too, I wanted to show just this symbolism, you know, of that you're in this darkness, but you can see something right around the corner. I also wanted to create just a tad bit of tension between at the very tip of her boat and then coming and it's touching each other. It's just this little space in between. And I wanted to do that to accentuate that contrast of right around the corner, that contrast of it's not always going to be this way, that contrast of it's going to be okay, it's going to be all right. Next image. This one is primarily a monochromatic color scheme. And I just wanted to explore mostly drawing and a little bit of collage. Excuse me. The out to the right is a printmaking process called deconstructed silkscreen, and it's this. You're working with this sodium alginate, which is kind of a seaweed essentially, and you make this big glop with it, and then you set aside some, and you put like dyes in it, and then you put it on a screen and let it dry, and then you use the rest of the dye as a release to release it onto different types of paper, and it's just a wonderful process. It kind of smells bad, but it's a great process. And as you see, a lot of birds will show up in my work, as you can see the ones to the left here, and lots of things that convey time and our understanding of time and how time feels in different parts of our lives. Next image. This is a series of images of the prophet Elijah being fed by ravens. I particularly love that image. It's a story of Elijah going down to Kerith Raven. It's east of the Jordan, and God like feeding him like bread and meat by these birds, these ravens, and that image really speaks with me because, as I shared with you earlier, with Bob and Jan and so many other people like Elaine and Uncle David, Sheila, and many other people, you know, they're like ravens. There are these people that are kind of off my radar, and I don't see them, and they give me something, and have loved on me and kind of loved me into being at my most vulnerable state. So this particular passage about Elijah really resonates with me. Next image. Here's another one. The close-up of his hands are taken from blueprints from a friend of mine from they're blueprints from, well, they're brown, but they're blueprints from Owens Corning. He brought a whole bunch of them to me. Oh my gosh, they were just so rich when he brought them to me. It was like Christmas. It was so, yeah, it was just so incredibly wonderful. I often with the images with Elijah fed by the ravens, I often will have this look on his face like, oh my God, has it come to this? And I think about that too, because that's a question, because a lot of times, like, the thing that I think I need, I want it provided to me in a certain way from a particular person, blah, blah, blah. And often that need is met in a way that's, you know, maybe not the way I even like, or maybe it's really even hard for me to accept. But this is, you know, this is where the healing takes place. This is the way, this is the route, this is a journey of getting to that point of being able to receive this. Yeah. Next image. I wanted to show a tad bit of playfulness on this one. Again, you know, like Elijah's just like, oh my gosh, man, has it come to this? And there's just this kind of playfulness with the birds where there's like, hey, look what we have for you. You know, you're going to be okay. And I do remember there are some times where like I get in such this kind of existential funk sometimes. And, you know, I'll have some kind of friend come along and, you know, they're with me, but they're same time, they're like, come on, snap out of it, Cody. And it's going to be all right. And so I just wanted to kind of share that. The text in the bottom is cut up from a poster from a self-taught artist named Howard Finster. So, okay, next image. This is one of the images that is at the Rife right now, and it's called Huldah. And so Josiah, the king of Judah, spent a good amount of energy turning Israel's eyes back to God. He was having work done in the temple when two of his friends, Shaphnah the scribe and Hilkiah the priest, found the book of the law. When it was read to Josiah, the breath was taken out of him, because he knew that the book had been ignored for generations and heavy consequences were coming. Hilkiah sought out the prophetess Huldah, who had a better understanding of the heart of God than him. In short, she prophesied national ruin. Her message brought about a revival resulting in reforms carried out by Josiah. Josiah could have consulted Jeremiah about the book of law, but he chose Huldah, a person mentioned only once in the Bible. So what made me think about doing this image of Huldah was about a woman named Frances Perkins. So if you're not familiar with Frances Perkins, she was under the cabinet of Franklin D. Roosevelt, and she was the major architect of the New Deal. So many things that came out of the New Deal came not because of FDR, but because of Frances Perkins. Her really like sphere that has contributed so much. I thought when I think of Frances Perkins, I marks it does make, and this leads, you can see that.
Hey,
Next
Cody.
image.
Hey, Cody.
Yeah.
Just to let you know that last
Yes.
10-15 seconds broke up quite a bit, but we do know you were talking about Frances Perkins and her phenomenal contribution. And you asked for the next,
Yeah.
is that right?
Yeah, next slide, please.
Thank you.
Okay. Next slide, please. So Tabitha is a woman like Huldah that shows up only once in scripture, but honestly, I think Tabitha, you can go back one, please. If you can go back one, please. Thank you. Tabitha shows up in the book of Acts, and she shows up just one time like Huldah. But they point out that she essentially, like, she really is like probably one of the best examples of the heart of God in terms of taking care of the vulnerable. And I don't know, I think of, when I think of Frances Perkins, I also think of Tabitha. Okay. All right, next slide, please. Okay. So a close-up is this image to the right here, that rust on top of the person's head. That was another one of those wait for it, wait for it, wait for it now images. I waited on that rust for about 2 years. So the kingdom of God came from a write-up from a writer that I just absolutely loved. It really kept my head above water, named Frederick Buechner. He died about a year or two ago. And I just wanted to read, I want to read what he wrote because it's just, I think it's so wonderful. He says, if we only had eyes to see and ears to hear and wits to understand, we would know that the kingdom of God in the sense of holiness, goodness, beauty is as close as breathing and crying out to be born within ourselves and within the world. We would know that the kingdom of God is what we all of us hunger for above all things. Even if we don't know its name or realize it's what we're starving to death for. The kingdom of God as our best dreams come from our truest prayers. We glimpse it at those moments when we find ourselves being better than we are and wiser than we know. We watch sight of it at some point in a moment of crisis we catch sight of it when at some moment of crisis a strength seems to come to us that is greater than our own strength. The kingdom of God is where we belong. It is a home. And whether we realize it or not, I think we're all homesick for it. Yeah. Okay, so next image, please. This came from a passage called Ephesians, and I'm going to paraphrase, and it just basically says, the evil thing that we're fighting against, it's more than just a thing right in front of us. This image was inspired primarily from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which was enacted by Desmond Tutu and Nelson Mandela after they broke down these walls of apartheid. It was commissioned to fuse a pattern of revenge one oppressed race took over another. And basically the way that it was set up was that if a perpetrator went before a court and admitted his crimes and did whatever the person asked of them to do, his crimes were forgiven. It was over a 2-year process, incredibly painful, and it was just a start of all the work that needed to be done and still being done in South Africa. But it's such an amazing example of how real change is done fighting evil. Of course, we see it so clearly in Martin Luther King and Gandhi. There was one example of a story in that Truth and Reconciliation Commission where this man was in the court and the woman was there and he killed both her husband and her son. And the court asked if she wanted anything from him, this man who committed this crime, this officer. His name was Van Brock. And she said, well, first I want to go to where my husband was killed. I want to pick up the soil that was there and I want to have a proper burial for him. And then she said, under court order, I want she goes, I'm an older woman, but I still have a lot of love to give. And she goes, under court order, I want Mr. Van Brock to come to the ghetto and I want twice a month and I want to love him and be a mother to him. And someone started singing Amazing Grace in the back of the room. And this woman comes forward to this man and he's out. It's just too much for him. He completely passed out. Nelson Mandela said through this, because he had a lot of people who were against it, said this country needs healing more than it needs justice. And on top of that, Desmond Tutu really emphasized, the power of a country being able to bear witness to the atrocities that were committed. That the power of people to tell their stories and their stories to be recognized and to be recorded. So in this image, I wanted to show that this woman's coming before these giants of death, and she's not bringing guns, she's not bringing anything. What she's bringing is some warmth. She's bringing a little fire. And the one to the right's like, okay, I've never seen this before. And it's almost like there's this hesitancy with accepting it, but that's what's happening. So, all right, next image. Okay. Jochebed was a mother of Moses. She lived in Egypt, where she and the descendants of Israel were being oppressed. The Pharaoh feared that the Egyptians would outnumber her, so they issued a decree that all the baby boys would be thrown in the river. And story about it made me think. So this one's called Jochebed Sendler. Into the Nile and wishing for the best, reminding me of Irina Sendler. Irina was a social worker and a nurse who smuggled over 2,500 Jewish children out of the Warsaw Ghetto during World War II. The conversations with the parents were heartbreaking. They, like Jochebed, had to entrust their children to the unknown. They had to make a decision whether to hope for the best in the ghetto or to trust a complete stranger, knowing that they might not ever see that child again. Once Irina successfully rescued a child, she gave them false documents and had them adopted into Polish families or hid them in convents or orphanages. She and her network made the lists of children's names and buried them in jars in a garden so that someday she could find the children and possibly reunite them with their relatives. And then I just say, may we have the courage to find ways to transform darkness into light. When you look at Jochebed and you look at the parents that had to trust Irina Sendler, it just so mirrors in my life what sometimes life will give you. It's like there's been so many times where I'll have to say, this is the best bad idea that I have. It's like, okay, I don't know what to do here, but I have to make this decision. And neither one of these decisions, both of these decisions terrify me. And I wanted to just kind of capture that. And you see the little jars with all the names of the children. So you see this while overlap a lot of stuff in recent history with like ancient history. Next image. Okay, I think okay. This is another image from Isaiah, and it just says, but now this is what the Lord says, who created you, O Jacob, and who by formed you, O Israel. Fear not, I have redeemed you. I have summoned you by name. You will pass through the waters, and I will be with you. And when you pass through the rivers, I will not sweep over you. And you walk through the fire, you will not be burned, and the flames will not set you ablaze. Yeah, so I just want to do a personification of that. To the right here, you'll see the collage of actual rose petals and the deep alizarin crimsons to the left and the right of that yellow section. Next image. Okay. Short series called The Way Home. And again, it's just, I won't read all of this, but it's just this way of, it's just about, it's a write-up about me finding my way home and how to get there, and just the different ways of the threads of people and places and things that I read that take me home. And there's a lot of deconstructed silkscreen in this one. Next image. So this is kind of a collaborative. This was all the background was done by my wife in college, but it was just sitting around. I was looking through and it's like, can I use this and cut this out? And so she agreed. So my wife Julie, that all the background is done by her. Next image. Another Way Home one, but there's no actual people in this one. And this one was a challenge from a coworker and friend, amazing artist Deborah Griffin, and she's like, "I need you. Why don't you start using some stuff from your sketchbooks and just put your sketchbooks right in there and paint right on top of them." So to the right, you'll see a close-ups of just drawings and line work from sketchbooks that I put in. Next image. So Deborah that I just spoke of, she for collage she gave me a bunch of letters and things like that from her father, who oh my gosh, I've already forgotten his name was Dr. J. Bruce Griffin. He was the chairman of the Department of Genetics, and these are some of his equations here to the right. And they'll come up in other areas too. I particularly love when people will give me really personal stuff of theirs to use for collage as this kind of way of extending their memories. Next image. Okay. So I do love music, and this is just Urban Songs #1, and yeah, so I just say from an early age, music was one of the things that kept my spirit alive. It became a roadmap for all the traffic jam emotions I couldn't put in words. Jimi Hendrix says blues is easy to play, but it's hard to feel. Sometimes God mysteriously chooses heal through music instead of other ways. So I've done a series of these, but these are just two of them. And yeah, so I'll just leave it at that. Next image. Next image. Okay. This is a small little series of paintings, and most of them are actually still available at the Sharon Weiss Gallery. You'll see like that string shows up a lot in my work with birds, and it's just this metaphor for different parts of the journey. And I think about like how, we don't get this big roadmap that tells us exactly where to go. It's often like, okay, you need to go northeast. That's it. That's all you got. And I think about just the different people in my life that helped me through this maze and through the woods and stuff, and even like little pieces of string or little breadcrumbs through different parts of these woods or caves or whatever, so that I don't get lost. And it could be people, it could be a song, it could be something that I read or something that I observed. And just how all these things kind of come together to help us on our sojourn. I love returning to that. I love, like, even the most scariest of things helping us. Next image. Next image. Okay. And the next image. Next image. Thank you. Sometimes I really love just working with pause neg, just letting the negative space be a really strong design element. Yeah. Next image. Image, please.
Cody, I think you froze for a moment. Were you asking for the next image after the next leg of the journey? I think we're having some technical difficulties. Hold with us just a moment. We'll wait until Cody unfreezes. This piece is actually in the Rife currently. There he is. He's back. Cody, I just asked you to unmute.
All right. Let's see where we are here. Okay. Okay, we skipped a couple images. If you can go back to the vast world outside, those images that just show the faces.
Yeah, back, that one.
Okay, and if you can, okay, and just keep going. Okay, next one, please. Next one. Next one. Okay. Just to the right here, you'll see this is a slight little thing of a thing called Collagraph, and I started participating with the Phoenix Rising Printmaking Cooperative here in town, which is a really amazing place, and just exploring different ways of printmaking and incorporating my own work and hopefully letting it stand on its own. This place is really amazing. I really encourage anybody, if they're interested in printmaking, to check it out in terms of either a core membership or an associate membership. It's really quite amazing. Next image. Again, here's some collagraphs that I used and cut up and used in my work that I did at Phoenix Rising Printmaking Cooperative. Next.
Go ahead, next.
Do the next image. Okay. I won't get into this too much, but my mom always let me know from the very beginning that I was adopted, and so at one point I actually found my biological mother and my stepdad, and they were quite an amazing duo. My mom is still alive, Peggy, and my stepdad's name was Richard. She was a nun for 14 years, and then she became a school teacher. And Dick, or Richard, well, this image is in honor of him. He was an Episcopalian priest, a psychotherapist, Greek Hebrew scholar. He met Martin Luther King. He marched with Martin Luther King. He got kicked out of churches for preaching against racism in his 60s. One thing he loved to share in his messages was this poem from Anne Sexton called "The Rowing Endeth." She actually wrote it shortly before she committed suicide in 1974. Her life was filled with many dark moments, to say the least, but I think my stepdad saw something quite beautiful in her brokenness. and wanted to share that glimpse with the broken world before him. So this is just an honor of him. Next image. This is taken from an excerpt from Catcher in the Rye, and it just talks about Holden Caulfield talking to his sister Phoebe, and he's just like saying, you know, because this is what I want to be when I grow up, because I see myself in this field just filled with these little children, and when they get too close to this thousands of little kids, and nobody's around, nobody big, I mean, except me, and I'm standing on the edge of some crazy cliff, and he goes, this is what I have to do. I have to catch everybody if they start to go over the cliff. I mean, if they're running, they don't look where they're going, I have to come out from somewhere and catch them. And that's all I'd like to do all day. I'd like to be the catcher in the rye and all. I know it's crazy, but I know that's the only thing I'd really like to do. I know it's crazy. And I just love thinking about like us being the catcher in the rye to those in our lives that are too close to the edge, and also the many people that have been catcher in the rye to us. Next image. All right, these are all mostly taken from poems, mostly from Mary Oliver or Emily Dickinson. So I'm just going to read the poem and then we'll go to the next image because we don't have a lot of time. This one is from Emily Dickinson. It's called Rest, and it just says, I felt it shelter to speak with you. I love that. I love saying that to people that after I spend time with them, I felt it shelter to speak with you. Next image. I just want you to notice these little pieces of light inside the hair of this person, and it's just in 2021, over 70 million people around the world have been forced from their homes. They're internally displaced people, refugees, and asylum seekers. The giant represents the millions of people that work day in and day out to provide hope and durable solutions to some of the most vulnerable in our midst. Next image. Next image, please. Poem from Mary Oliver. Also, I wanted to be able to love. And we all know how that one goes, don't we? Slowly. Okay, next image. Another Mary Oliver poem. Still, what I want in my life is to be willing to be dazzled, to cast aside the weight of facts, and maybe even to float a little above this difficult world. Next image, please. Mary Oliver again. I stood willing and gladly in the characters of everything, other people, trees, clouds, and this is what I learned, that the world's otherness is an antidote to confusion. That standing within this otherness, the beauty and the mystery of the world out in the fields or deep inside books can re-dignify the worst stung heart. I love that line. Next image. Same poem that I just read for the last one for this one. And then what I just wrote about this image, this one's actually available at the Sharon Weiss Gallery. This original was created in response to a holiday that often exacerbates deep loss by endless commercials spreading consumer cheer. I see it for what it is. Can someone really have that much joy shopping at Target? This image touches base on the dark night of the soul and how we need others and the world's otherness to walk through the pain and with the pain in a healthy manner. My ongoing prayer for myself, family, friends, and others is that the darkness and the light that lives within each of us may constitute a kind of dialogue that brings us into a deeper conviction that we are truly loved and not alone. That these seemingly little things in life start to collectively bring hope into view. Hope is never a straight line. There's this Kroger clerk who is beyond creative with his conversations. Sometimes I laugh so hard that it totally erases the possibility of some gut punch later on that day having the final say. For that, I'm thankful. For those of you going through the catastrophic loss, my prayer is that God will meet you where you are, bringing comfort and rest along with a few good friends to unearth some hidden happiness. Okay. Next slide, please. All right, these next images are all under the box of darkness into light, and it's from Mary Oliver poem. Someone I once loved gave me a box full of darkness, and it took me years to understand that this too is a gift. Next image.
Thanks everybody for your patience. I think Cody's frozen again. Gonna guess that he will pop back with us momentarily. So hold tight. Yeah, I'm sure he will rejoin us in just a moment. So again, thank you for being here. There he is.
All right. Okay. Next image. These are all very small pieces. Next image. Again, I love having these kind of bubbles of light coming out of a box. Just reiterating that poem. Next image. And next image, please. This one is from a line from Haruki Murakami. No matter how much time passes, no matter what takes place in the interim, there are some things we can never assign to oblivion, memories we can never rub away. So I wanted just to have this thing of like, you know, these chinographers like hooked up and listen to all the stories of these trees, you know, like find out, oh, this was the fire of 1923, or we had a drought for a year and a half here. And I love thinking about those as metaphors for keeping our history for us, keeping the diaries of what's going on through nature and what we might be doing to nature, and having these people recording that. Next image. Again, same kind of thing, same kind of idea of looking at those rings in the trees to really learn about what history is telling us. Next image. So this image was actually blown up 5 stories high. It's in a mural at a parking garage right behind the convention center that you can access off of 3rd Avenue. I was just kind of amazed, you know, when you see these little marks that are as long as your fingernail, and all of a sudden they're like 3 or 4 feet across. It was just really great to see. So next 2 images are the same thing, so just scale wise. Next image, please. Next image. Okay. Again, letters from Deborah's father to her grandfather during World War II. And this is an image called Unmasked. And again, it's just a lot about when you really are with someone that you love and care about, how it allows you to learn how to be who you really are, to take off these layers of yourself, to be vulnerable and be loved, and to love in return. Next image. This one's called Anniversary. My wife Julie and I just celebrated 25 years last month. And this is a quote from Tom Waits, one of my favorite singers. "She's a person by which I measure all others. She's who you want with you in a foxhole. She doesn't like the limelight, but she is an incandescent presence on everything we work on together." Next image. This was taken from inspired from my time at the food pantry. For most of my time, right now I do registration, but for most of my time I would just take groceries out to people's cars, and I would just ask people if they want prayer for anything. And oh my gosh, the pantry prayers just break your heart. I mean, somebody's saying, my wife and I, we took in this family, we found out the husband's selling meth out of the house. But if we throw out the family, he's taking those kids with him, and we love those kids. Or my whole family died of the Ebola breakout. Just, I often I will go on Mr. Rogers and realize, like, after they'll share with me something, I'll say, I think in many ways you're much closer to God than I am. If you could pray for me, I would really appreciate it. So more often than not, people are praying for me more than I'm praying for them. So anyways, this is what that image is in reference to. Those people in our life. Next image. This is of Miss Havisham. Mrs. Havisham was from Dickens' novel, The Great Expectations. Received a letter at 8:40 a.m. on her wedding day saying her soon-to-be husband decided to cancel the marriage. At that point, she stopped all the clocks the very moment the letter arrived. She spent the rest of her life in her wedding gown, wearing only one shoe because she hadn't put the other one on when the news came. That moment defined the rest of her life, and everything else in her universe stood still. So I'm thankful for the village of people who have helped me walk through painful moments in my past and present in a healthy manner. They are the instrumental in my journey from 840 to 841. My heart still has areas where I have yet to move forward, though. Years go by and I might only move a second closer to my goal. But as painstakingly slow as it is, I'll take it. And so yeah, it's just 840, and you can see all the different seconds going from 840 to 841. Okay, and if we have time, I'll show you some progress shots. Okay, so starts with chicken scratches. Next image. More of a detailed sketch. Next image. Now here, what I'll do is I'll find like the top I want, but then the skirt, I'm gonna try it out. It's almost like she's she's trying all these things out, and I need to kind of see all these variations. Next image. Next image. Next image. Next image. Next image. Next image. All right, so now I'm going to start blocking in shapes of color. You can just see it's just this kind of washy thing. Next image. Building up the details. Next image. Okay. Next image. All right. And next image. All right. And there's the final image of how it all started with those chicken scratches and how I went from there. And there's just a kind of a close-up of these subtle things going on in the skin. So thank you so much for of your day, to be able to give a little glimpse, a little bit more into what I'm thinking about when I create, and a little bit of my history, and a little bit of just how I look at the world. Here's a bunch of information if you want to follow me or get in contact with me in some way. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you again for the privilege and honor of being able to share, and hopefully our paths will cross someday.
Thank you so much, Cody. That was wonderful, per usual. So, I don't know that we necessarily have time for questions, but I do want to thank everyone for joining us and taking the time to listen to Cody and have a look at his work. The one thing that I will say is anytime anyone speaks to me about Cody who has met Cody, there is a warmth there and like this easy smile that comes onto their face. It's so lovely when you get to chat with people who interact with artists who you can tell have been impacted positively, and every single person that I've talked to that have had any kind of interaction with you, Cody, have had that shine on them. So well done.
Oh, thank you.
In your work and in your interaction, it's important. So thank you again for joining us for this talk by Cody Miller. Thank you for the generosity of your talent, Cody, and for being a part of Arts Beacon of Light. And big thank you to the curator, Katie Monahan, and for our board member, Tina Houston, who inspired this whole initiative. And furthermore, thank you to the Ohio Arts Council's board, the governor, the legislature, who all support the Ohio Arts Council, this great space, and of course, Ohio artists. Thanks everyone, and have a great rest of your day. Bye.